In a world that grows louder by the day, a world filled with restless noise, constant performance, and an insatiable hunger for external attention, the man who moves with quiet discipline, unshakable self-control, and deliberate restraint stands apart. He does not blend into the cacophony. He creates a space of silence around him. He stands out, not for his volume, but for his presence. He is like a lion moving with quiet, lethal confidence through a pack of noisy, scrambling hyenas. This is not an act of superiority for show. It is the natural result of an inner world that is ordered, focused, and governed by principle rather than impulse. Real power, the Stoics taught, is not measured by decibels. It is not found in who shouts the loudest, interrupts the most, or commands the most frantic energy in a room. True power is measured by steadiness, by the unflinching calm of a mind that cannot be thrown off its axis. It is not defined by how much attention you can forcibly pull toward yourself, but by how much innate dignity you protect within yourself. You can read the depth of a man's wisdom not by how he behaves in the secrecy of his own home, but by how he carries himself when the eyes of the world are upon him. Why? Because public moments are the ultimate test. They are the pressure chamber that reveals the true quality of private preparation. Every gesture you make, every glance you offer, every micro-reaction to provocation or praise signals to those who are observant exactly what kind of man you have chosen to become. Stoicism provides the framework for this public conduct. It teaches that how you act in the view of others is not a performance to be crafted. It is proof. Tangible, observable proof of your inner structure. Your restraint in the face of temptation is the evidence of your self-command. Your composure under fire is the certificate of your mental training. So today, we will go beyond simple etiquette. We will uncover and dissect 8 critical things you must never do in public if your goal is to earn lasting, genuine respect. Not the fleeting applause of a crowd, but the deep, silent acknowledgement of your character. This guide is rooted in Stoic philosophy and the timeless architecture of masculine integrity. This is not about building a mask, but about forging the inner steel that makes the mask unnecessary. Let's begin. 1. Never lose your temper in public. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote a reminder to himself that cuts to the core of emotional sovereignty. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the foundational axiom. Losing your temper in a public setting is not an exhibition of dominance or passion. It is a public confession. It is stark, visible evidence that the external world still has a direct line to your internal controls. You are announcing that your peace is conditional, that it can be revoked by a traffic jam, a rude comment, or a missed appointment. Anger might feel powerful in the moment, a surge of adrenaline, a raised voice, a physical presence that makes others step back. But this is an illusion. In reality, anger exposes your deepest vulnerabilities. It shows that your emotions are not tools you use, but masters you serve. It reveals that you have handed the steering wheel of your state of being to someone else's actions, to a random event, to the chaotic flow of a world you cannot control. A Stoic man categorically refuses to hand that power away. When plans collapse in front of colleagues, he is the one who takes a slow breath and asks, "What's the next practical step?" When someone attempts to disrespect him with a snide remark, he doesn't escalate. He remains composed, often responding with a simple, unblinking gaze or a question that reflects the absurdity back on the aggressor. Why? Because he knows that calmness under pressure is the loudest, most resonant form of authority. It communicates that you are operating from a different, more stable frequency than the chaos around you. Consider the archetype of Stoic endurance. Epictetus. Born into slavery, his body was broken by a cruel master. The story is told that as his master twisted his leg, Epictetus did not scream in rage or beg for mercy. He simply stated with terrifying calm, "If you continue, you will break my leg." The master continued. The bones snapped, and Epictetus, through the agony, looked up and said, "I warned you." There was no explosion, no curse, no loss of self. That is not weakness or passivity. That is absolute mastery. The lesson is eternal. You cannot control the presence of fools in the world, but you can always control your participation in their foolishness. You can refuse to become one. Therefore, when chaos erupts in a meeting, Be the still point. When insults are hurled in a social setting, offer a small, knowing smile, not of agreement, but of pity for the other's lack of control. Every single time you remain composed while others unravel, you are drawing a stark, visible line in the sand of human conduct. The room, whether it admits it or not, sees the profound difference between a man governed by discipline and a child ruled by raw, unprocessed impulse. 2. Never complain or seek sympathy in public. Seneca, the Stoic statesman, offered a piercing definition of poverty. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Apply this to emotional economics. Complaining is a form of craving. It is a public craving for pity, for comfort, for rescue, for acknowledgement of your hardship. The moment you vocalize a complaint, you initiate a trade. You are attempting to exchange your inner strength for the cheap currency of external sympathy. And that is a bankrupt trade. Sympathy may be given, but it rarely, if ever, translates into genuine respect. More often, it breeds quiet pity or subtle contempt. The Stoic carries his burdens differently. He carries them quietly. He does not announce his struggles, he contains them. He does not narrate his pain, he metabolizes it. He adapts to the obstacle, he improvises a solution, he improves his position, and he moves forward, all without a soundtrack of grievance. His strength is not a performance for an audience. It is a private practice that occasionally becomes visible through his results. Visualize two men caught in a sudden heavy downpour without an umbrella. One man curses the sky, shakes his fist at the clouds, bemoans his ruined clothes, and loudly proclaims his bad luck to anyone within earshot. He is visibly ruled by his discomfort. The second man says nothing. He simply pulls his collar tighter, lowers his head just enough, and focuses his entire being on the single objective of reaching shelter. He is not ruled by the storm, he is responding to it with focused action. He rules himself. Complaining changes nothing about the objective reality of the situation. All it does is broadcast an internal weakness. It tells the world that your emotions have control over your tongue, that your discomfort is so intolerable it must be externalized and shared. A Stoic consciously replaces the habit of complaint with the discipline of action. Instead of the passive, victim-oriented, "Why is this happening to me?" he asks the active, agency-oriented questions, "What is required of me now? And what is the very next step I can take?" The shift is transformative. The moment you stop feeding your negative emotions with spoken words and start feeding your reality with concrete effort, your entire life trajectory shifts. The man who can endure significant pain, whether physical, emotional, or professional, without demanding an audience to witness it, commands a quiet, profound form of admiration. People are drawn to contained strength. So remember, your suffering may be entirely real and valid, but your decision to complain about it publicly is always, without exception, an optional choice. Choose silence and choose power. 3. Never gossip or speak ill of others in public. Epictetus gave a direct and practical filter for our speech. When you are tempted to talk about someone's faults, turn to yourself and examine your own. This simple instruction exposes the petty nature of gossip. A small man, an insecure man, speaks about people. He makes others the subject of his conversation. A wise man, a grounded man, speaks about principles, ideas, and actions. When you engage in gossip, you inadvertently reveal far more about your own interior landscape than you do about the person you are judging. What does it reveal? It shows that you derive a sense of worth, not from your own growth and achievements, but from the act of dragging others down to a level you perceive as beneath you. The subtext of every gossip session is a silent, desperate declaration: my value is dependent on their failure, my security is bolstered by their flaws. This is not power, this is psychological dependence. It is the opposite of sovereignty. The Stoic understands that speech is a sacred faculty. Words are not neutral, they shape the very man who speaks them. They reinforce neural pathways, solidify judgments, and color the soul. Therefore, he practices rigorous verbal discipline. He engages the triple filter. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Does it serve a useful or kind purpose? If it fails any one of these tests, it remains unsaid. Marcus Aurelius enforced this in his own rule: if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. This discipline transforms silence from a passive absence into an active, chosen state. Deliberate silence becomes a form of authority. In a world saturated with opinions, hot takes, and verbal clutter, people instinctively respect the man who talks less and observes more. They sense that his words, when they do come, have weight because they were not spent frivolously. His quiet in a noisy room feels not like absence, but like latent strength. So, when you find yourself in a group where gossip begins, where a colleague, acquaintance, or friend is being dissected in their absence, your role is not to correct the group morality. Your role is to disengage. Listen if you must, but do not join. Do not nod along to encourage it. Do not offer a confirming, "Oh, I know, right?" When the conversational hook is thrown to you, "What do you think of him anyway?" you have a simple choice. You can change the subject to a neutral topic with grace, or you can speak only to the person's virtue, if any exists. "I've always found him to be dedicated to his family," is a statement that ends gossip without confrontation. By governing your tongue, you begin to govern your destiny. You attract people who communicate with substance, and you repel those who feed on drama. 4. Never seek validation or show off in public. Marcus Aurelius offered a command that bypasses theory and moves straight to action. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. In a social and digital economy addicted to attention, validation, and likes, the man who does not actively chase these things becomes paradoxically magnetic. His lack of hunger makes him stand apart. When you boast, when you feel the need to flash the symbols of your success, the watch, the car, the name drop, the humble brag about your accomplishments, you do not project confidence, you project hunger. You look like a man who is not yet convinced of his own worth, and who is therefore begging the crowd to confirm it for him. True, unshakable confidence has no need for announcements. It doesn't parade, it doesn't seek the spotlight, it simply stands, solid and assured, whether anyone is looking or not. The Stoic redirects his search for validation inward. He seeks the approval of his own conscience. He finds his deepest satisfaction not in a public trophy, but in the private knowledge that his actions aligned with his principles, that he told the truth when a lie was easier, that he worked with integrity when cutting corners was possible. He doesn't need the applause of the crowd because he has already secured the respect of the one judge that matters, himself. History is filled with this lesson. Think of the Roman generals in a triumph, paraded through the streets as gods. The crowds roared their adoration. Yet the wise general, often with a slave whispering, "Remember you are mortal," in his ear, understood the fickleness of public approval. The same crowd that cheered him today could condemn him tomorrow. The Stoic does not let his self-worth rise and fall with this unreliable meter. He measures himself against the steady, unchanging standard of virtue, not the volatile volume of public opinion. Today, the algorithms reward noise, extreme opinions, lavish displays, curated perfection. But the man who masters the art of restraint becomes an enigma, and mystery, in an overexposed world, commands a deep form of respect. So do not beg for attention. Let the quality of your work, the integrity of your word, and the consistency of your character speak for you. Let your daily discipline echo far louder than any words you could post or speak. The man who makes his life a public performance for applause inevitably becomes a prisoner to his audience's changing tastes. 5. Never mock or humiliate others in public. There is a cheap, counterfeit form of power that weak men traffic in, the power borrowed from belittling others. The wise man builds authentic power through the far more demanding task of mastering himself. Publicly mocking someone, making them the butt of a joke for the amusement of a group, might earn you a quick laugh. But it carries a hidden, exorbitant cost, the erosion of your own dignity. You trade a moment of social credit for a piece of your character. Seneca saw the true motivation behind insults. To insult a man is to confess that you fear his opinion. Let that sink in. Mockery is, at its core, insecurity wearing a clever mask. It is the need to feel taller, smarter, or more powerful by mentally or verbally stepping on someone else to elevate yourself. It is a confession of your own comparative insecurity. The Stoic, whose sense of worth is internally derived, has no such need to prove anything through diminishment. He understands that real dignity never flows from the act of domination. It flows from the capacity for restraint, the power to cause harm, paired with the principle to forbear. Marcus Aurelius wielded absolute power. He could have humiliated senators, generals, or servants on a whim. Yet his personal writings are filled with reminders to himself to stay humble, to be patient with the flaws of others, to show mercy. He chose composure over cruelty. That choice is the hallmark of real authority, authority over oneself, which then legitimizes authority over others. Therefore, practice this discipline. Even when you are clever enough to dismantle someone with words, even when you see the perfect opening for a cutting remark that would get a laugh, choose silence. When you have the opportunity to embarrass someone who has acted foolishly, choose a private word of correction, or, more often, simple empathy. Cruelty, no matter how witty, ultimately reveals a weakness of spirit. Control, especially control over the impulse to harm, reveals formidable strength. The man who remains kind and principled while being fully capable of harm commands a deeper, more enduring respect than the man who uses his wit or power primarily to be cruel. 6. Never reveal too much emotion or vulnerability in public. A critical distinction must be made. Experiencing emotion is not a weakness. It is proof of your humanity, your capacity to feel, to connect, to care deeply. Stoicism is not about becoming a robot. However, displaying unguarded, raw emotion to the wrong people in a public forum is a strategic error of the highest order. It transforms your inner life into a potential weapon that can be used against you. Epictetus defined freedom through this lens. No man is free who is not master of himself. When you break down in tears, when you beg, when you plead your case with desperate emotion in a public setting, you're opening the gates to your inner world and inviting in spectators who may not have your best interests at heart. You're giving them a map to your pressure points. The Stoic feels the full spectrum of human emotion, grief, anger, joy, fear, but he expresses it with wisdom and discernment. He reserves his most vulnerable expressions for solitude, for journaling, or for the trusted, sacred company of one or two individuals who have earned that privilege over years of loyalty. He does not perform his emotional life for crowds, colleagues, or strangers. Why? Because not everyone deserves access to the inner sanctum of your soul. Access is a privilege, not a right. Consider the ancient gladiator, a figure the Stoics often referenced. He walked into an arena before tens of thousands of screaming spectators facing maiming or death. Yet he was trained to guard his fear, to control his breathing, to present a face of fierce focus. He did not do this because he felt no fear. He did it because control over his external presentation was an intrinsic part of his survival and his performance. Modern professional and social life is a different kind of arena, but the principle is identical. You will feel intense pressure, disappointment, and pain. But you decide the when, the where, and the how of revealing that reality. The world does not respect the man who is visibly owned by his emotions. It respects the man who clearly owns them, who acknowledges them internally, processes them privately, and decides consciously how they will influence his public actions. So when the intense urge to break down, to lash out, or to crumble under scrutiny appears, this is your moment of training. Take a slow, deep breath. Withdraw your awareness inward for a moment. Remind yourself silently, I feel this deeply, but I will reveal it wisely. By managing your emotional display, you do not become cold, you become strong. You protect your strategic position, and in doing so, you understand a fundamental truth. In the public sphere, perception is a primary component of power. Protect yours. 7. Never argue to prove your point in public. Arguing in a public setting, be it a social media thread, a dinner party debate, or a meeting, is an activity that rarely, if ever, results in a changed mind. More often, its primary function is to reveal the size of the participants' egos. The Stoic operates from a different understanding. Wisdom does not need to shout to be heard. Truth does not need to wrestle in the mud. It needs only to stand consistently over time. As Marcus Aurelius noted, when others begin to argue, raising their voices, talking over each other, and becoming emotionally invested in winning, the wise man shifts into observation mode. He listens, not to rebut, but to understand their perspective. He watches their body language, their frustration, their need for dominance. He understands that at this stage, the conversation is no longer about understanding or discovering truth. It has devolved into a contest for social dominance, a primal game of status. The man who feels the compulsive need to prove he is right in front of an audience has already lost something far more valuable: his self-control. Epictetus freed his students from this trap with a brilliant reframe. If someone wins an argument against you, they have not harmed you. You are not your opinion. Your worth is not tied to being correct in every dispute. When you deeply internalize this, you are liberated. You stop taking casual disagreements as personal offenses. You stop feeling the need to correct every person who misunderstands you or holds a foolish view. You can let their words pass by you like wind. A man who can witness verbal chaos, even when it's directed at him, and walk away internally unchanged, radiates a unique form of authority. The other party may leave thinking they won the exchange, but later they will remember your calm. They will remember that their provocations failed to provoke, that their attempts to draw you into the fray were met with a wall of serene composure. Restraint, in a world of reactive desperation, is unforgettable. It is the clearest possible line separating the disciplined from the desperate. Therefore, when you feel the heat of debate rising in your chest, when you feel the urge to jump in and correct, to prove your intelligence, pause. Offer a small, gentle smile that conveys not agreement, but a kind of detached pity for the need to engage at that level. Say nothing. Let their noise, their aggression, their need to be right, bounce harmlessly off the shield of your silence. In the economy of public perception, your deliberate silence will always carry more weight than their frantic winning words. 8. Never disrespect yourself through careless behavior in public. This final point is the bedrock, the synthesis of all the others: unwavering self-respect. Your public behavior is the most honest advertisement for your private philosophy. Never engage in actions in public that betray your own dignity, that make you a passive participant in your own diminishment. What does this encompass? It means never getting destructively drunk at a public event, surrendering your faculties and making yourself a spectacle. It means never acting the fool for a cheap laugh, trading your self-respect for momentary attention. It means never chasing validation through outrageous or attention-seeking behavior. It means never begging for inclusion, approval, or recognition from a group. Seneca directed, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." This command includes associating with your own future self. Your habits and actions are your most constant companions. Ensure they are good company. Every time you step out your door, you are presenting a living case study of your Stoic practice, or lack thereof. How you walk into a room, how you make eye contact, how you listen, how you react to a server or a subordinate, how you handle boredom or frustration. These are not minor details. They are the unspoken text of your character. They communicate more loudly than any resume or title who you are and what you stand for. If the answer is a clear no, you have the power to stop immediately. Because respect is not something you can demand from others through title or threat. It is something you maintain through quiet, consistent, visible discipline. The man who possesses genuine self-respect has no desperate need for validation from the crowd. He is his own most important witness, his own most stringent measure, his own final judge. He answers to a higher court than public opinion. When you act from this place of integrated integrity in public, people sense it at a visceral level. They may never comment on it, but they register it. They feel the solidity, that silent, subconscious recognition. The understanding that you are governed by an internal code is infinitely more valuable than any round of applause or viral moment. Therefore, guard your personal dignity as if it were the only armor you possess. Never trade it for the fleeting, empty pleasure of a laugh at your own expense. The man who willingly plays the fool to entertain others may gain their laughter, but he forfeits their lasting respect. Your dignity is your sovereignty. Never surrender it. Closing reflection. The fortress within. In the final analysis, Stoicism returns to one unshakable, eternal truth. The man who achieves mastery over himself inevitably masters the atmosphere of every room he enters. You do not need to dominate others, to speak over them, to manipulate or intimidate to project power. You only need to achieve absolute dominance over your own impulses, your knee-jerk reactions, and your turbulent emotions. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel, or the fortress within. It is a psychic space so well defended, so calm, and so ordered that the noise, drama, and chaos of the external world cannot invade it. It remains a place of perfect quiet and clarity. Let others spend their lives in the exhausting pursuit of external approval. Let them argue to feed their egos, flex to show their status, complain to gather sympathy, and perform to feel seen. You, the man who has done the internal work, have a different role. You remain still at your center, unshaken by praise or blame, fully present, yet not attached to the outcome. Because the man who moves with a deep, unwavering calm through a world of chaos is not invisible. He is unforgettable. His presence is a quiet rebuke to frenzy and a living invitation to peace. Remember, respect is not a loud, garish thing. It cannot be purchased with wealth or demanded through force. It is felt. It is a quiet energy that radiates inevitably from the man who no longer needs to seek validation to know his own worth. His worth is an established fact, a foundation he stands upon. So, let this be your code, written not on paper, but in your nervous system. Never lose your temper in public. Never complain or beg for sympathy. Never gossip or tear others down. Never seek attention or show off. Never mock or humiliate. Never expose your unguarded heart to those who haven't earned the key. Never argue for the petty victory of being right. And never, through careless action, disrespect the man you are building yourself to be. Every single act of restraint you practice is another stroke that sharpens your power. Every moment you choose composure over reaction is another brick cemented into the wall of your authority. Move through the world differently. Walk with the presence of a man who owns the space he occupies. Speak with the intention of a man whose words have weight. Choose calm, deliberate action over reactive chaos every single time. Because authentic, timeless strength is not discovered in the ability to dominate others. It is forged day by day in the relentless private discipline of dominating yourself. And when the world encounters a man who carries peace in his posture, patience in his words, and potent purpose in his silence, it may not always understand him, but it cannot help but respect him. This is the final transformation, where cultivated calmness becomes unassailable power, where chosen silence becomes eloquent strength, and where daily discipline becomes the ultimate, unshakable freedom.